Hi, everyone. Welcome back. It's great to hear how many web developers are amongst the audience here today. And I want to ask you to imagine how cool it would be if you took all of those web apps that you've developed and you could leverage in some way all the capabilities that a fully native app could leverage. Well, with some of the web investments we're making in Windows 10, we're making it really, really easy for you to take those web apps and transform them into something called progressive web apps that will allow you to do exactly that. So here what I have is a progressive web app and a native app running side by side on an Android mobile device. Now, who can tell which app is which? Who thinks the one on the left-hand side is the native app? Who thinks the app on the left-hand side is the progressive web app? So it's really hard to tell, right? Both show a great compelling experience, and they're both very performant. But what actually is a progressive web app? Well, to help answer that, I want to give you a brief history on some of the platform features we've introduced in recent versions of Windows. So back with Windows 7, we introduced the simple concept of being able to pin websites. So you could pin a site to your taskbar in exactly the same way as you could do with a native app. Now, with Windows 8, we introduced packaged web apps. So you could take all of those web assets, bundle them up into an app package, and submit to the Windows Store, again, in exactly the same way as a native app. But with Windows 10, we wanted to make that even easier. So rather than having all of those assets sat locally inside of your package, we wanted you to be able to simply point to your web server and submit the package to the store. Now, continuing on that journey with Windows 10, we're introducing support now for progressive web apps, which is the next evolution of hosted web apps. Now, there's one very key advantage with progressive web apps, and that is they run cross-platform. So the same progressive web app is going to run great on Chrome, on iOS, on Android, on Firefox, and on the universal Windows platform. And of course, the huge advantage you get from running on the universal Windows platform is that same progressive web app is going to run on the smallest IoT device to the largest Surface Hub screens, and even on new experiences such as HoloLens. Now, a progressive web app really comprises of a bunch of different features and capabilities, and web standard features and capabilities. So I'm not going to go through every single one of these one by one, but you can think of some of the key features being your site needs to be responsive, it needs to have progressive enhancement, it needs to be as secure and safe as a fully native app. And then one of the new features that we've introduced support for is network independence. And again, we've done this in a very standardized way, so we're bringing support via service workers, which I'll describe in a little bit more detail shortly. So how do you get started? How do you actually get one of these built and up and running? Well, the very first thing you need is a great site, a great web app. Now, at Microsoft, we've started to experiment early on with all of our internal web apps and starting to try and figure out how we can convert them into progressive web apps and look at some advantages they would bring. So I'm going to show you one of the web apps that we have internally, and that's an engineering system. It's a simple app that enables me to view the status across all of the different Windows 10 branches and builds, and I can view the different quality of each build, and eventually, when we're happy and satisfied of the quality level, we can push that out to the Windows insiders. So there's a few things about this web app that makes it well set up for becoming a progressive web app. So the first thing is it's hosted on a secure endpoint. Another thing here is that I can move the window down and it will respond accordingly. And then really, it does things like, if I go and search in here for a particular branch and build, it makes asynchronous calls to go and pull in the different data and results. Now, I'm working on a very quick network connection here, so that was almost instantaneous. But over a slow network, you would see those results pulled in one by one and kind of trickle through because the data is set in different server locations. So a pretty typical web app that you're probably all very familiar with. Now, the next thing you're going to need to take your web app and convert it into a progressive web app is an app manifest. And we're probably mostly familiar with app manifests on various platforms, but what we're talking about here is a standardized manifest that each platform can read from and interpret in its own unique way. Now, that app manifest is just a simple JSON file describing your site. So it's a set of properties and values. Now, what we heard from developers was that although this is just a JSON file, it was actually quite error-prone or cumbersome to go and create one. So we wanted to make this really easy for you to go generate one of these for your web app. So we introduced a tool called PWA Builder, which I'm going to show you now. So you can go to pwabuilder.com today, and it's really just a wizard stepping you through the various steps of generating a progressive web app. So I can go to Get Started in here, then I need to take that secure endpoint for my site, and I just need to copy that and paste it into the text box in PWA Builder here. And I hit Get Started. And what this is going to do is it's going to go look at that site, and if there's an existing manifest file there already, it's going to go reuse that for us. But if there's no manifest file that sits on our web server, it's going to go and generate that for us based upon the meta information inside of the site. So let me just make this a little larger so you can see it. If you need to make any tweaks to your manifest file, you can do that on the left-hand side here. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the JSON file that's been created for us, along with any flags of any warnings and suggestions for optimizing this further. So if I go to suggestions, you can see in here that it's saying, you're missing some images, and it would be great if you could include these. It would give you the optimal experience across all the different platforms. So let's go fix that up now using the tool. So if I go to upload an image, I can go select an image on my file system, and I'm going to use the Ninja Cat unicorn sticker. And I get an option to go generate various images. So this will go and generate all those different required images and sizes across each of the platforms. Now, for the purpose of speed, I'm just going to clear that for now, but that's really helpful for getting up and running across all the different platforms. So you can see my unicorn sticker here, and you can see a 3D version of the dinosaur version of this out in the lobby there, very discreetly in the corner. I'm sure you've seen that. And then on the right-hand side here, you can see the JSON file gets updated accordingly. Now, the next thing I need to go do is download this manifest file and copy it to my website and upload that and publish it. So I just hit download here, and it's going to give me a zip file to go and enable me to do that. So I've done this ahead of time. If I go back to my local file system here, you can see I've got my website, and then I've downloaded the manifest file ahead of time. So I'm just going to go copy that across onto my website like so. And then in Visual Studio Code, I just need to make one small change, and that's to reference the manifest file that I've just gone and generated. So here's my index.html file, and on the left-hand side, you can see I now have the manifest file I just copied across, and I just simply need to go and reference that, which I do through a simple link tag. So I add href to manifest.json, and I need to specify the rel type to be manifest. And I hit save, and at that point, I'm good to go. I'm good to go and publish the first step of my progressive web app. Now, there's another advantage for going to create a manifest file, and that comes in the terms of a integration into search engines. So having these app manifest files make them a great target for being indexed by search engines. And in here, you can see the Tradio progressive web app being indexed by Bing in the search results. So it starts to highlight the icon for the site, it highlights the description, the app name, and also a very clear call to action to go and download it from the Windows Store in this case. So what's the third thing that you need to go and get started building a progressive web app? Well, one of the key advantages from a PWA is that it works great offline, or occasionally offline, in much the same way as a native app. So typically what you would end up with is this. Prior to having the offline support, you would have a web app that calls across to the network, and then if the network was a little bit shaky, it would fail and you'd get a suboptimal experience. With a service worker, the service worker sits as a proxy in between your app and the network, and so you can start to intercept the calls. So you may provision some content from the local cache. You may even pre-cache certain assets for your site so that they're instantaneously, so you don't need to make the round trip across the network each time. So again, I'm going to return to PWA Builder because, again, it makes this really easy to go and create one of these. So if I go into the wizard here and we go to the next step, you can see we can now go generate a service worker. Now, on the left-hand side is what you see is a set of different scenarios, going from the very simple offline page scenario And that's simply going to give you an offline page that you can provision, a static page that will get returned if you have no network connection. And then we're going to move up to a more complex scenario here, the cache-first network scenario. And what that's going to do is, when your web app makes a call to the network, we're going to intercept it with some logic, and we're going to check our local cache for those assets first before going out to the network. And then when we go out to the network, we get the assets down, and we add to the cache over time. So we start to introduce improved performance over time. Now, what you see on the right-hand side is 2 code snippets. The first one is going to go and register the service worker and specify where the file and the logic sits. And then the second one is actually that file and the logic itself. So I'm going to go across to my app again inside of code. I'm going to scroll up where I've already got the registration code in here. So let me just uncomment that and talk through it real quick. So the first thing we do is we check for the service worker if it's already been registered. And if it hasn't, we're going to go call this register method on the service worker object. And in here, we specify where the logic actually sits, and then the scope to which it applies. So we don't necessarily want our service worker to be invoked for every single call to the network. We may just want certain areas or islands of our site to call through the service worker. Here we're specifying global. So the next thing I need to go do is look inside of my service worker code. And this is fairly empty at the moment. I've got some boilerplate code in there to get up and running. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pre-cache a data file, an activity.json file. And I'll show you what that actually does in just a moment. The next thing I need to go do is copy in that logic from the website. So in here, I'm going to take the logic, and I'll just step you through this in just a moment. And I just need to go paste that into code and save that. Now, there's a few events that we hook up to in here. The first key event is the install event. And the install event is when the service worker first gets registered. Now, what we're doing in here is we're doing the pre-cache at this point. So I've got a helper method in here called pre-cache. I'm just going to make sure that my list of file names, the variable I used to list the file names, matches up. So I'll look at the pre-cache method down here, and I'm adding this to the local cache object. And I get the cache object through the service worker implementation. Now, the next key method that I need to go and add is the fetch method. So this is where the magic happens. This is where you start to intercept those HTTP calls out to the network. And from the scenario I selected in PWA Builder, this is the behavior I actually get, as previously described. I go and check from the local cache if this HTTP request object is available, and if it is, I'll return it from the cache. If that fails, and it's not available in the cache, I'll go pull it from the network, and then I'm going to add that asset to the cache so it's there the next time around. So by adding that code, I can now just serve this up locally and look at the advantages in performance that it's given me. So because we have the integration into the Windows subsystem for Linux, I can easily drop into a bash shell at this point through Explorer. And then I've installed a Node HTTP server module in here for me to serve up my content locally. So I'm just going to fire that up now. And I'm going to take my local endpoint in here and just browse to that. So we'll paste that into there. And the difference or the advantage here is somewhat subtle, so let me just highlight this. If I go to my production site here, which is published as an Azure website, then on the right-hand side, if I hit refresh, you'll notice that each time I'm starting from scratch in getting that activity feed, and it'll poll over time and start to add to that feed, but I want to produce a better user experience here and pre-populate that. And that's what I'm doing through that pre-cached activity.json file. So if I go back to my local version that I just created and hit refresh, you can see here I get that pre-cached data, but I'm also adding to that over time as well so it stays nice and fresh. So the next thing I would want to do is I'd probably want to generate this goodness across the whole site and add other files and assets to the service worker. And I've got a load of files I've referenced here in advance. So I'm going to go copy those into my variable, like so. And I'm going to save that off. And then I've got a script which will go publish this to my GitHub repo and publish it out to the Azure website. So I'm going to run that through now. And while that's getting published up, I pre-recorded a video here to show you the comparison in performance between the web app using the same user journey both before and after the service worker has been implemented. So look at these side by side on here, and you'll notice, again, same user experience, same user flow through each, but one's going to perform way quicker. And then the other advantage as well is actually, take a look at the data at the bottom there, the actual consumption of the network bandwidth. You'll see we get actual real money savings here through the reduced throughput going across the network as well. So I've already published this out to my Azure website, but the next thing I can go do is publish it to the Windows Store. Now, publishing to the Windows Store is going to give me additional benefits around discovery of my app. So the first thing you get to do is create some richer assets, such as screenshots. You can provide a description. But another key benefit as well is people get to see how your web app is rated. So if you're in the high 3s or 4s, then that's going to incentivize people to go and download your app. And so this is just really another surface of discoverability for your progressive web app. Now, if I go back to PWA Builder, which is our new best friend, then we actually find this makes it really easy to publish to the Windows Store. So the next step in the wizard is publication. Now, if you take a look at the top right here, we give you a couple of options for Windows. The first is this one-step publish process. And it's going to take a couple of simple details, your name and email address. And when you hit submit, we're actually going to go and publish the progressive web app on your behalf to the Windows Store. Now, at some point in the future, you may want to take full control over your progressive web app that's in the Windows Store. And so we're going to email you a token which you can use to contact us with, and we'll then transfer ownership back to you for full ownership. Now, the other option that you get in here is downloading the package. And there's a couple of reasons you may want to do this. You may want to make fine code tweaks to your progressive web app before you submit. But also, you may want to go and submit or sideload the app locally so you can start to test it on the different machines that you expect your app to go run. So I've hit download here. And again, I've done this in advanced time, so I'm going to switch back across. And I'm going to show you what package you end up with. So ES Tracker is the name of my web app. And let me just go into the folders here. We've got a bit of a deep folder structure, but if I zoom in here for you to see this, you get this PowerShell script that's going to go and sideload your progressive web app onto Windows, much in the same way as you would do with a fully native app. So I'm going to go run that up now. And remember, this is pointing to that exact same Azure website that we just saw within the browser, except we're running it in the context of a native app here. So if I go to my Start menu, you will see, it's quite small, but you'll see that the app appears in the app list. And it's using that same icon that we generated through the tool as well. And this means I can now treat it as a native app. I can go pin it to the start, so I get a start tile in here. I see my sticker. Again, this is using the larger size sticker that was generated for us. I can go load it up, and it's using the same sticker on the splash screen there. And I now get my app running in a dedicated window, and it's fully responsive. It's using all those optimizations I made for the service worker. And then I can go search for results in here, and it's super quick because I've applied that service worker logic across a whole bunch of assets for my site. So that's how you publish to the Windows Store. And by having it published to the Windows Store, there's a couple of benefits you get, as I just alluded to. So you get a standalone window. You're not running in the context of the browser. And that also means it's lighter weight. And it also means you get access to the whole raft of Windows APIs that a fully native app would do as well. So some of the canonical examples here are things like the calendar or Cortana. But for the particular web app that we experimented with in here, I want to show you a particular example we used and how we use those Windows APIs. So back to my app, I'm going to show you this device, this special device that we created for the engineering systems. And it's a mobile release button. So I'm just going to make this a little bit larger in here. Now, it allows me to do two things. I can switch the modes of this. So I can put it into review build mode. And then just by twisting this magic release button, I can pan across to the left and the right, and I can review the quality of each build. So this one's 98.6, which is pretty good. The one here is 87.9, so Not so good. I'm going to choose to publish this out to the insiders in this room right now. So I'm going to switch across modes, first of all, to the release mode. I'm going to click on the launch build button, and this is where we need to do a big grandioso countdown, because this is a very special event. So please join me in counting down 4, 3, 2, 1. Boom. So there's our dinosaur friend again that we have out in the back there. Now, of course, I've not actually pushed that right out to the insiders here, but I did want to show that for this particular scenario, this is quite powerful in being able to take that same web app, this progressive web app, and integrate it with accessories and hardware just using those Windows APIs. Now, of course, the secret here is it's not any old device, but it's a Surface dial. I'm sure many of you already guessed that. So let me show you how the code actually worked for that. If I'm going to switch back over to code in here, this is just simple JavaScript. It's just like the JavaScript running in your website, but it's checking for a Windows object. So I can check if the type of Windows is available, and that's telling me that I'm running in the context of this Windows app. Now, once I do that, if I have that object available, I have full access to call any of those Windows APIs that I want. This is giving me that power of the native apps. And so in here, I'm getting an instance of a radial controller type and getting a controller instance returned. I'm going to generate those menus that you saw, so review builds and release. And then all I need to go do is just hook up the events for when those buttons are invoked. So it's very much the same as you would do with any ordinary button click event in HTML and JavaScript. And then I make the final call there to send off the release. So that is what I wanted to show you. I wanted to show you the simple steps of taking that web app, the journey through to creating a progressive web app, and some of the advantages it brings. You can go and get started really easy today by joining the Windows Insider program and getting the latest bits as we start to flight those out. You can go and use PWA Builder today to experiment with your web apps and transform them into those progressive web apps. And once you get there to that kind of common ground, you can start to think about the new scenarios that you can light up for your own experiences, and then eventually you can submit to the Windows Store. So I look forward to meeting you guys face-to-face tomorrow for the workshop, where we'll do some of this and spend some hands-on time going through each of these steps in more detail. And please, if you think what you've seen today is cool, please go and tweet about it, MS Build Tour, PWA. And all the content that you've seen during the day today, just as a reminder, is available here. And that's everything from me. Thank you.